Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Special Education Learning Community for 2025. Happy New Year. Glad to see some new faces today. And we have with us Shara Blair. She is our Ames Unit IT support person. And I'm going to go ahead and let Shara introduce herself, but I just want everybody to know we are recording this, so if you have to jump off or anything, I will send out certificates and a link to Shara's slides and the video recording sometime tomorrow. All right, welcome, Shara.
Great, thank you. I just a little bit of background about myself. I started with the Office of Public Instruction in January of 2023, and just recently, so like effective like a week ago, I think now, and like with the AIM unit entirely. I have no intentions of not supporting special ed. My background, I was at a school district previously, so I had, I'll say, 8 years of experience as an administrative assistant for special ed, supporting my team with all things Infinite Campus. And so I'm definitely not a policy person. So if you have policy specifics, those are definitely something where you'll need to do outreach to the monitors or the monitoring team or other special ed leadership. And then for those of you who may have participated in my community of practice session last year, I'm essentially doing the same presentation, maybe some minor changes here and there. So if you've already listened to my presentation, I will not be offended if you would rather do something more productive with your time. But I am definitely here to support you if you have questions or concerns, and just kind of want to make sure that you are getting all of your questions answered with specifics to using Infinite Campus for special education. All right, with that,
Shara,
yep,
hi, sorry to interrupt. I just also wanted to remind people, if you have questions and you want to put them in the chat, we'll monitor the chat box. Or if you want to raise your hand, we'll have Shara respond to you.
perfect. Thank you if you'd help me monitor that. I'm not a pro at looking at chat and hand raising while I'm presenting. All right, first things first, I will really encourage you to use our website as the best place of getting contact information for anyone from our teams. There is a Meet the Team link for special education that will take you to information about each of us, our email links, our phone number as well, so you can scroll down through that. The AIM unit also has a Meet the Team link, and we can provide support with you for the Infinite Campus side of special education. And then again, you have the contact information for our team members there. So please use those resources. And if I don't know the answer or someone on our team doesn't know the answer, by all means, we will take your information or concern and get back to you with details to get your question answered. A little bit of background information about the AIM and Infinite Campus system. I do want to reference that the Office of Public Instruction mandated use of the special education module in Infinite Campus effective March 1st of 2010. So this has been in use for a while. Essentially over the years, a lot of state reporting features have been added into what's required of districts for us to collect information that we then in turn report to the feds. So with that, each district has their own unique web address or URL to log into Infinite Campus. So it's really your district's system that's used for special ed and state reporting. And I do kind of want to make it clear that AIM and Infinite Campus are really synonymous. So many schools reference it as Infinite Campus. We had branded it back at that time when it was implemented rather than to like brand it as the product that it is, called it Achievement in Montana. So if you hear people talk about AIM or talk about Infinite Campus, they're really one and the same. It's the student information system that we use for the special education and state reporting. Um, Many of the resources that I'm going to reference in this presentation are links referenced on the OPI website, specifically the special education or the AIM website. So I did provide those links for you on the handout. You're welcome to look at those guides for future reference. The other thing that I want to point out, since the Infinite Campus system is a web-based program, and there are always new laws and changes, state reporting requirement changes, that there are updates released periodically. And I'll say that from sped experience, the updates are often kind of like surprises to us, and it's not necessarily intended to be that way. There are some things that Infinite Campus does as a core product update. So it's sometimes things we as OPI are not aware of. Other times it's something that we are maybe planning and implementing changes. But those updates typically happen 3 to 4 times a year. You may have noticed that the updates have been happening more often, and essentially that's because we are trying to update some changes necessary for recent legislation or other state reporting collections. On the OPI website, if you go to leadership, hover over leadership, then go to achievement in Montana, then the Infinite Campus update schedule reference, it will give you like when we've taken updates. So I'm on the leadership AIM Achievement in Montana website. And then if you scroll down to the collection schedule reference, the last update we took was December 13th, and we're projected to take another one in February or March. So if you have issues, sometimes it's because we took an update. So it's just kind of an important reference to know. All right, I'm assuming if you're on this, you're using Infinite Campus for special ed reasons and probably are more familiar with that possibly than whatever student information system your district is using. Your district may be using Infinite Campus as the student information system. So if you haven't heard this already, Infinite Campus is transitioning to the new look, and their official announcement in March of 2024 that was as of July 2025, the new look will be the only option available. So if you're still using old look, I can't encourage you enough to make sure that you transition or at least start trying to transition to new look. So in my presentation, I do have a link to a knowledge base article with a video tour of the new look. And I will be talking about new look quite a bit today during this presentation. Essentially, new look is a little bit different look and feel, has all the same tools as what they call the classic view, but there are some improvements. And so how do you know which look you're in? So I did provide a couple examples here. The new look has the green and I'll say black menu. The old look has the green and white look, and specifically it has index and search at the top, where the new look has a more of a tab system. And to turn new look on or off, in the upper right hand corner, you just simply click on the little person icon, and you can toggle on and off until July of 2025, so that you can kind of get comfortable with using new look if you have not switched already. I do want to point out one of the things I like the most, I'm really trying hard to rephrase this. One of the things I like the most about New Look is something called favorites. Um, so I want to say my favorite is favorites. And that's basically the ability for you to create a custom list of your own of tools you use the most often. So I'm going to switch really quick to my test site. So just kind of a quick little tour here. I'm navigating over to the upper left-hand corner. This is the menu, and this is now a tab system. So there are 3 tabs to the menu. The very first tab, which is the file folder icon, is the main menu, and this is very similar to index. And I'm in what's called a flyout list. You can also change this to be more like the classic look where you have the big long list. That is not my favorite. I prefer the flyout where you basically, once you make a selection from the menu, it flies out this new menu with all of the subcategories. So most of what you do for special education is on the student information menu item, and then you scroll down to the special ed section down here. And so you should all be familiar with special ed documents. This is a place that you go frequently. And once you're on a selected tool, up here at the top, it gives you the title of that tool that you're on and the ability to click the star. When the star is blue, you've added that tool to your favorites. And so on the menu then, the second tab is your favorites list. And so you can see I've added several items to my favorites list because these are things that I use the most frequently. Although I'd like this to have folders and maybe some other features, currently this is just a list. And again, it's a customized list. And you can edit this so that if there's something that you use the most often, you can move that up to the very top or wherever it's the most convenient for you to use that in your frequent tools list. And then go ahead and save. One other feature that I like about the new look is when you do have a menu item selected, so I'm going to go back to the example of going to the special ed section here. Once you've selected one of the tools in a category, then you have this option on the right-hand side for related tools. So all the other tools that were in that category are now available on the right-hand side for you without having to go back to the menu to access them. So I can easily flip between special ed documents, team members, or state reported data without having to go back to the menu. And I actually have put all of those things on my, I didn't put team members on there specifically. So if I want to put team members on there, I would just simply click the star and now it's on my menu. I can edit, move this back up so it's with all of my other special ed things. And now I can navigate either here from my favorites menu or from my related tools on the right-hand side. So in a nutshell, that's the new look. The search is maybe a little bit different too, that it's the magnifying glass and then you would choose which, and you may not have access to all of these tools based on your user rights, but if you wanted to search for a student, you would choose search student, and then you'd be able to select the magnifying glass here to search. Also similar to the classic look, you also have the selection of what year and potentially what school you're viewing for your district. And in special education, I'll kind of say best practice is to make sure there's some features for special ed that require you to have the specific school in which the student is enrolled before you have access to that tool. So if you ever get an error, potentially that would be the first question that I'd ask you is, what year and what school do you have selected? And so you may need to kind of drill down to choose the school that the student is enrolled in before you can create a document or something like that. So that's kind of my little 101 on favorites. While we're here, does anyone have any questions? Are they struggling with anything? You all love New Look? No response is maybe a good response. All right. I guess if you do have concerns, please let me know. I'm happy to help you. All right. The other thing that's important for special education is that students have an enrollment. And it's really difficult for me to say all of the things that need to be done. So I do want to provide some of this as background information because you may not be the person doing it. There might be a support staff at your district that are doing these tasks. So in order for you as a special education teacher to create a student plan, IEP, or an evaluation, or even a form as part of their Infinite Campus electronic special education record, the student does need to have an enrollment. And the enrollment is very complex because it's used for several state reporting items. So if you ever have issues or concerns, please reach out, ask questions. We're more than happy to discuss your specific situation and give you the recommendation on what the enrollment needs to look like. Essentially, an enrollment is when a student, what date is the student going to be starting with you? And then if the enrollment is ended, it's when was the last day you served them or that they were in attendance. We do collect attendance information. We do collect average daily attendance information. So how long was the student enrolled? How many days did they attend? How many days were they absent? So although it might not be important to you specifically, those are the complex part of the details that we collect from the districts. The districts or the students also have different enrollment types, and those enrollment types, and so I'm looking here in this enrollment column, are a P, N, or an S. A P is a primary enrollment, meaning that student is physically attending your school and goes to a class. An N enrollment is a special ed only enrollment. So those could be like early childhood students. They could be private non-public students or homeschool students that are attending with you, but you're providing special ed services. And then an S enrollment is often referred to as like a secondary enrollment, where that student isn't necessarily, it's not the primary enrollment for the student, but potentially another place that they're going. So a good example might be a student at a middle school might have a secondary enrollment if they're taking an advanced placement class at a high school. And it might be like a high school outside of their district. And there are some other complications for that, for some of our programs. For students who are in the early literacy programs or Montana Youth Challenge. I'm trying to think of all of the examples, but homeschool students and students in the evaluation process who have not yet been served, I would recommend that those that the students that are in like preschool, that are in preschool, so not yet attending your district, that those students should likely have an N enrollment. But this gets to be very complex, and again, you're not potentially the person who's maintaining this record. So if you ever have issues, just make sure you're asking lots of questions. As we do want to make sure all of this ties into child count reporting. and exiting reporting, and then students the fall and spring, what we call A and B, or annual number of belonging counts, for how your districts get some of the monetary compensation from the state. So for state reporting purposes, child count and other collections designate a student as special ed based on the most recent locked ER with a qualifying disability and a current locked IEP. So this is important information for child count on how those numbers are reported to the state. This is also going to be imperative with assessment. Now that we're doing the mass assessment, I want to say the key word in here is current and locked. So if a document, whether it's an ER or an IEP, is not locked, it does not sync to the state. And the state's database is what we're using for many, well, essentially all of the state reporting and the assessment components. So if something's not matching, you might want to go look to see if the document is locked. And if you're still having issues, then please reach out for support with potential reasons of why it's not. And then I want to say the word current is for child count. The current definition is going to be that those documents are valid as of count date. And child count uses the fall count date, which is typically the first Monday in October. So if you're saying, well, why is this student not showing on my child count, it might be because their ER or their IEP is not current as of count date. And then for other state reporting, it's usually valid as of today or whatever the reporting period is. So I want to be clear that the processes that you guys are doing are important to serve the children that you are serving, but it's really part of the data that we're collecting from you for either IDEA purposes or other federal reporting. So in that, since Infinite Campus is a statewide system that all districts use for special education, there is a process called records transfer. This is often completed by your school office, enrollment staff, potentially your special education staff. It is, I'll say, an important, and I want to put like an exclamation point on that, an important part of your process when you get transfer students. This is your means of acquiring Infinite Campus records that exist for the student in the entirety of their enrollment in Montana, so that potentially you don't have to recreate a document. And then if a student moves, the next district also gets all of the important records that they need to serve the student. So again, only locked documents transfer. So if you know a student is leaving from your caseload, I can't stress enough for you to go double check all of the documents for that student to make sure that everything is locked, that's complete. And you may need to communicate with the other district if you were in progress with something, why it's not locked, and potential options for getting that documentation to them. But only locked documents transfer. I will tell you that there are glitches. The process maybe isn't the most smooth process, but every single district should be doing this for all students that transfer in from another school. So the incoming school has to send a request. The request then looks at the state system and said, who was the last school that had an enrollment? We're going to send the request over to them. That outgoing school then has to release the records, hopefully ensuring first that things are locked before they release. And then once the incoming school gets the notice that the records transfer has been released, there's an import process of importing the IEP, importing the ER, and importing other special education documents. Also part of that is recommended that you import the enrollment history for each student so that you get that complete picture of where they've been, how often they move. Those are all important factors when you're looking at the story of a student. So if there are issues in this record transfer, or you believe that there's a document, or you're looking at a physical document, but it's not something you're able to get in Infinite Campus, please let us know. I'll say we have kind of some magic tricks on our end to get you the documents, or can work with the other districts along the way who maybe didn't import, so that they can get the records first, then you can request from them, and then you can import. So this is a screenshot of what that, once a records request has been released by the outgoing district, these are the imports that are available or potentially available to the incoming school. So anything that's crossed out means there's no data to import. Anything that isn't crossed out then are options that you can import into your system. So like I mentioned, I at least encourage you to import the enrollment history so that you know where the student has been. The IEP, the ER, and the SPED documents are all important pieces for you. And again, as I mentioned, that if a district along the way doesn't import something and the student moves, it kind of breaks the chain. So that's where you need to contact us to get some support to get everything transferred to you. Also, this is probably one of my most frequent phone calls for support is in the directions for the records transfer. There's this very nondescript place in the import for the IEP and on the ER that says the recommendation is that you check this box saying locked. If you don't check the box locked, the documents are imported in unlocked format, which is not recommended. So I can't say enough, always, 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 when you're importing, or make sure you go talk to the person who is doing this process, that you check the locked box on the imports so that the IEP and the ER come in locked format. And then if you need to do like an amendment to the IEP, you can follow through with that process. And again, only locked documents sync to the state. So this is where some things can kind of go wrong with state reporting, is because it's unlocked on your part, then we're not seeing that that student is special ed because the document's not syncing from your system to ours. So I always recommend that you review the documents for your students, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. In the records transfer, one thing that's also confusing, and again, you might not be the person doing the records transfer process, but I want you to understand how it works. So the SPED documents folder structure is based on the enrollment records at the current school district. So if a student was eval'd, and I'm going to kind of use this screenshot example here. If the student was eval'd in 2014 at a previous school district, when you import the records from that district, the ER, that's the most current ER, it's going to go to this magic folder at the bottom called Calendar Not Found, because your school district did not have an enrollment in 2014. So the system has no place to locate this record based on the enrollments for the student in your district. So it moves it to this calendar not found. So if you're ever looking for an ER for a student, this is always something to look for. This folder is always at the bottom of a student's document list. And your student should have if they were eval'd in Montana, they should have an eval in an Infinite Campus format where it clearly is in a folder called evaluations. which could be nested in this calendar not found folder. The other documents, if there's a current IEP, it would go into the current year folder for the enrollment at your district. So it's 24-25, it would go into a plans folder in the 24-25 documents list. If the IEP is outdated or interestingly future dated, the document, because it's outdated, is going to get moved to this other magic folder called uploaded forms. It converts it to a PDF. It's nothing that you can even modify because it's outdated. And it dumps everything into this uploaded forms folder. And oftentimes if a student has been in special ed for a period of years, that list of PDF documents is very long. If at any time a student has had an enrollment with you during that part of their special ed history, as long as you have an enrollment for them in that year, the documents will go to where you'd expect the plans or forms or progress reports to go. So I know that gets a little bit tricky, but that's really how the records transfer process works between districts. So hopefully if that sheds some light on why things are organized the way they are, I would love to make some changes on that, but that's going to be a bit before we can make any of those. So any questions on the records transfer process? None? All right. Okay, another important component for, and again, this kind of background information for how Infinite Campus works for special education is that the information in your document for the guardians or others is based on what's called the household. So this is a family unit associated with an address. And so again, it may not be you that's doing this process, so you might want to network with whoever it is at your school district that's doing it. But essentially, someone needs to set up a household that adds the people in the household. So I'll give an example of a mom, a dad, and a student. So those people need to be added to the system. The student needs to have an enrollment, and then you also need to add the address. And then there's a process called Census Wizard where you're going to combine all the people. So we're going to pick mom, dad, the student, and the address and say that that's our family unit. And in that wizard, you also designate then who are guardians, which is how that part populates in an IEP. So if you're not seeing guardians in your IEP, it's potentially because this Census Wizard process did not get set up correctly. And all things that are fixable, it just takes someone with the know-how how to do them. The editor for this also in your IEP, there's a refresh button that will pull current information. So if you've already added your guardian information and learned that there's an address change, you may need to communicate with whoever does the household setup, where they're basically going to end date an old address, add a new address in the Census Wizard, and then you would need to go back to your editor and refresh to pull the current information. So just make sure that if you have changes that you update or notify people when that happens, so that all the parts and pieces of what makes it work in the IEP is working. This information for the household also ties for team members and meeting participants. So if a household is not set up, there's another means to add this information, but we really recommend the household setup and that you add the parents to the team members list by the find and link because they are people in your system. And then just kind of an FYI, if you are going through the work or your district is an Infinite Campus, using Infinite Campus as your student information system, there are some tools for mailing labels that are really handy when you're doing progress reports and those kinds of things. So it could potentially save you a lot of time instead of having to handwrite an envelope every time you have to send out progress reports. So this is an example of what that census wizard looks like, where you're basically going to, once you've combined the people and the address, you basically say, when does the address start? When do the household members start? And then essentially you're building the relationships, and this screen gets super confusing. So I always say, look at the student. So in this example, Jim and Nancy are the parents. So I'm going to look at just the student's record, and I would define who is Jim to Tyler. And I, in this dropdown, would say that he's the father. And then for Nancy, I would say she's the mother. And when did that relationship start and or end? So typically it's when they're joining your district, you would just put in that start date. And then this is the important box that ties to the IEP. If this box isn't checked that they're guardians, when you get to that editor in the IEP, that's why a guardian would not show up. And again, I know that's all confusing, but I want you to know there's some complexity behind the scenes of all the things that make special education work. All right, so getting into some of the tools for special education case managers. Infinite Campus recently, it's been out for a couple of years, but they have a tool and a lot of people don't know about it, but it's called the Case Manager. I'm going to call it the dashboard, caseload dashboard. And I really feel like this is a powerful tool. So if you haven't seen it yet or aren't using it, I really encourage you to. And what's important about this is it does give you the role. So this is only viewable for people who have been designated as a case manager or a service provider. And so the role then in this, my example, is only showing that this person is a case manager for these students. And why this could be helpful to know the distinction of case manager versus service provider is speech therapists, where they might be just a service provider for some students. They may be the case manager for other students, like I would say the speech only students. And so in those instances, that speech therapist is responsible to maybe call the meeting, write the IEP, do the evaluation testing, things like that. So that is really helpful for them to kind of sort through who are my students I'm managing or who am I just providing services to. The other thing that's important here is their date of birth and their grade. And then it will list the last evaluation in Infinite Campus format for the student. And you do have some key indicators here of whether these are initial or reevaluation, so that's important information for you. And then the designation icon of the document being locked or unlocked. So this is a really quick way for you to see, do I have any unlocked documents that I need to attend to? The plan meeting is basically when was the last IEP, and then the plan is actually designating the current Infinite Campus format document of their IEP, and again, whether it's locked or unlocked. One thing that I love about these columns is you can click on the column header to sort by that. And so this is a really great way at the beginning of the year for you to sort, and then it will look at like who are the students that I need to see or do an IEP for in the month of December, or what's coming up in February. What do I have for like, oh my gosh, I have 4 students that need IEPs in the month of May. Maybe I want to pull one early so that I don't overload myself during a month. And then the last column is their disability. And this is just a good check for making sure that everything is correct. So this column is actually pulling from the disability in the student's IEP. So if this information is blank, there are lots of things that depend on other things. So the disability in the IEP is something that you refresh in an editor where it refreshes from the most current locked ER. So if you had an ER open and refreshed, it's not going to pull anything because it wasn't locked. And so if you see these kind of missing pieces, it's important to kind of go back and look, check your steps. So I'm going to give you an example of the caseload. So again, I'm in a test site. And so if you were preparing for child count, and again, mine's a test site, so I'll say kind of lots of holes. But what I would be looking at is, well, this student doesn't have an evaluation, but they have a plan. Like, what's going on here? Why would a student have a plan but not an evaluation? So that might be a transfer student where the import got missed. It might be an out-of-state student that you need, where you have the ER in a different state's format, so you just need to create a mini. So then that would populate this field for you. And then I can see here really quickly at a glance for this student that I have a reevaluation, but it's unlocked. So like, why is this unlocked? Did I never get a signature? Did I forget this? What happened? And then you can kind of go do some research so that you can address these issues. And again, I have an IEP here that was done in November, but it's not locked. So I would need to go investigate what happened and why, and make updates as applicable. So again, I can sort by the plan date, so I can see what's coming up, and then do that really quick look for where do I have unlocked documents. And one thing that I like about this screen is that you have the ability to click on the little folder icon as a shortcut to get you right to their Documents tab. So you can kind of eliminate having to use the menu. And now that I'm in special ed, the special ed module, I can just kind of click back to my caseload. And if I want to go look at another student, I can just click on their folder and it'll get me right to their folder. So this is a really great, like I said, dashboard for you to use to kind of just do checks for, did I get everything done for this student? How does my data look? What holes am I missing? It will help you prepare for child count and assessment needs. Any questions on this? If you click on the student's name, that takes you to the student's summary tab, which is where you get like their contact information and things like that. And now that I'm out of special ed, this is where I would go back to my favorites menu to get back to my caseload dashboard. Hopefully that helps you navigate around a bit in the new look. Okay, for unlocked and locked documents, we do advise that you periodically review your caseload, and hopefully the tools I just gave you for navigating through the caseload dashboard helps you to just kind of click through each student. Is everything locked because I have child count coming up, or what is unlocked and what are my tasks that I still need to complete to get it to a point of being locked. So the dashboard does give you that quick view of just the IEP and the ER, but you should also be locking all other documents. including forms and progress reports. So I will say my best tip or trick on this is when you're looking at the documents list, you're looking for the year folder to be a padlock. So if there's no padlock here, it means something in that year is unlocked. So in this example, you can see that there's a form that's unlocked. So once that form is locked, it would change this year folder to be locked. So you can really quickly kind of look through a student's years and see where there are some things that are not locked. And again, only locked documents transfer. So if you want to make sure and do a courtesy that you lock everything so the next district gets it, then you can kind of hopefully ensure that you're getting locked documents from another district. There is also another report, oops, I skimmed by that really fast, called the Caseload Summary Report, and this is a canned or built-in report in Infinite Campus that allows you to run a caseload summary, and there's several options when you're building this report. So the specifics would be that you're looking for SPED plans, and then you get to make determinations like, do I only want to look for active plans? That would exclude anyone whose plan is outdated. And do you want to only include active roles? So that would be if someone had ended themselves as a case manager, you wouldn't see a student on their list. And then you get to pick what year you want to run this for and then generate the report. And this report is amazing for helping districts prepare for child count, because what you're looking at, I would say you're looking for holes. So if you see something where there is no disability, this report is basically because the IEP didn't get refreshed, but this is a great place to go look to make sure, like, are these the correct disabilities that I want to report for child count? If you see the special ed status is no, it likely means that something's unlocked, and so it's not designating the student as SPED. And then the number behind here is the setting of service from your state reported data tab. So if you don't have a setting of service, then you can assure that you need to go enter that so that you can report for child count correctly. So again, it's a great simple report that you can run and then just look for those holes to help you prepare for child count. And this is the report that the monitors use when they do their compliance monitoring. So this really keeping up with who's on your caseload and keeping up with your state reported data and making sure that documents are locked are really going to make that process much easier for you. And if you need help with running that report, I'm happy to help. So speaking of state reported data, again, this is an element that we collect in Infinite Campus. I'll say years ago, making me sound old, this data used to be something that was part of the IEP, and it is now a separate specific tab or component of the special ed module that has to be updated manually for each student. But this is required information for state reporting for child count and exiting. And think of it as a chronological or historical record of how the student was being served. So I would recommend that you include this in your review periodically throughout the year, especially before child count and exiting. If you are serving a student, they should have a setting of service that's open-ended. Any students that are no longer being served, the setting of service should be ended, and they should have an exit record added specific to their exit reason. It might be moved, known to be continuing is usually the most common. Also, if the setting of service changes, you would end the original record and create a new setting of service for the student. So if you were serving them less than 80% in the regular ed classroom, so they would be like an O2, then, and they now, based on changes over the years, have moved to an O1, then you would end their O2 record as to when that was effective, either by an IEP change or an amendment. And then you would add the new record for when the new setting of service took effect. And then again, if you're ending a service, you're also adding that exit record, which ties into the end of year exiting reporting that districts do. And you're saying, when did the student services end? And that gets really confusing to school districts on how those records work. So I'm just going to give, this is an example here of the student was an O1 from November of 2017 to February of 2024. And then they switched to be an O2 as of March 2024, but that ended on June because the student graduated. So the student then has an exit reason that they graduated as of June 30th, 2024. So this is what I would expect to see for a typical state reported data record. And then how we're using this is for child count in the fall. We would say if child count was on October 2023, we're going to say, well, this student would be reported as an O1 because that's the record applicable to count date. And then at the end of the year for exiting, we would say, oh, the student exited and this was their exit reason. So hopefully that kind of ties things together as to why you're doing those things. So if you're serving a student, they have an open-ended record. If you're no longer serving them, you end it and then would add an exit reason. Oops. All right. So for team members are something that do need to be updated manually as well. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to like roll caseloads over. If like say it from third grade to fourth grade, you guys have different teams. So someone is going to have to go touch every single student and end it for the old case manager and add it for the new case manager. And as long as you're maintaining these, and this is the thing I love about that caseload summary, of any student that you're serving should be on your caseload dashboard. If they're on there and you're not serving them, you should be doing some maintenance. Make sure all the students' records are locked. Then remove yourself as update their state reported data, and then remove yourself as a team member for that student. And we do recommend that you use the find and link tool. And again, that is dependent on that people are added as people into your system. So it's going to look that there's someone exists in your school's infinite campus system. And then for special ed case managers, you would give yourself the role of case manager or service provider. And that piece is important for the participants page or the signature page in your documents. So this is an important part of the role that you do during the process of building an IEP or an ER. Some districts have implemented, and this was advice given a long time ago, maybe potentially back around the 2010 era, but that they have what are called fake team members. And this gets to be kind of a district choice on how you work this, but rather than saying Cheryl Blair's the principal and I'm going to add her as a team member to all 20 of my students and make her so that I can put her down as the administrator or designee for the participant in the meeting. And then Cheryl leaves, and now I have to go update all 20 of my students' IEP team members again. What you can do is have a fake person called administrator or designee, and you just add that to every single of your 20 students. And then it doesn't matter, whichever principal is there just goes and signs on that line. So that is kind of a nice little tip or trick. If you want help setting that up, essentially all you need to do is add a person with the last name of administrator and the first name of or designee, and then you just use find and link to go add them as a team member.
Shara,
Uh-huh.
we only have a few minutes left,
Okay,
and so I wanted to make sure there was some time for any questions.
you bet. I'll maybe kind of end on this. I can't encourage enough that you do periodic review throughout the year, and I call them triggering events. So, beginning of the school year, hopefully maybe before school starts or as soon as after school starts as possible, prior to child count, at the end of the year, and I'll say before you leave for summer, please go through your caseload and make sure documents are locked, that your team members are updated, that state reported data is current, that a student has an IEP, an ER, a referral, all of the things that are required. And then on the triggering events, make your updates to go through your students' documents. Again, are things locked? Do I have the right team members? Is state reported data current? So when there's an IEP meeting on a reevaluation, and then incoming or outgoing events. So when you have a new student, review these things. When a student is new to SPED, review these things. The student has moved, if they've exited, if a parent has revoked, if the student has graduated, so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, just review. You're looking to make sure that your student has all the right documents, that their team members are updated, their state reported data is updated, and that documents are locked. Do you guys have any questions, or are there pain points for you that I can help you work through? Any wish list items? You guys are all pretty quiet today.
It's very helpful. Thank you so much, Shara.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.